At my daughter's wedding, the groom's mother stood up in front of 200 guests, pointed her finger straight at me, and shouted, "You don't belong here. Leave now." For a moment, the air froze. The chandeliers above spilled golden light over silk gowns and polished shoes, yet all I felt was the sharp burn of humiliation crawling up my neck. The music stopped mid-note. Laughter dissolved into whispers. And every pair of eyes, neighbors, colleagues, strangers, pinned me like I was some intruder. Inside, my chest ached with questions I couldn't voice. Why me? After decades of sacrifice, how had I become the unwanted guest at my own daughter's wedding? My hands trembled against the fabric of my dress, but I forced my back straight. I would not give them the satisfaction of watching me break. I turned toward the aisle, each step echoing louder than the last, heels striking against marble like a slow drumbeat of defiance. Behind me, the ballroom glittered with champagne and chandeliers, but I knew something none of them did. One single decision I was about to make would rip the mask off their perfect little fantasy, and bring their empire crashing down. My name is Margaret Hill. I'm 58 years old, a retired nurse from Seattle. For most of my life, people called me steady, the kind of woman who always kept her head down, who worked double shifts without complaint, who put everyone else first. I raised my daughter, Sophie, alone. Her father walked out before she was 5, leaving me with nothing but bills and a promise I made to myself. She will never feel the hunger, the shame, the loneliness I once knew. So I saved. Every paycheck, every dollar. I patched the same pair of shoes 3 times instead of buying new ones. I worked through Christmas Eves in a cold hospital ward while families laughed around their fireplaces. I skipped vacations, skipped dinners out, skipped everything except Sophie's future. And standing in that ballroom, under the chandeliers that cast diamonds across the marble floor, I reminded myself of those nights. Of the mornings I packed her lunch before rushing to a 12-hour shift. Of the times I whispered over her sleeping head, "One day, sweetheart, you'll have the life I never had." That wedding wasn't just her dream, it was mine too. The proof that all the sacrifice had been worth it. That my daughter had found love, stability, respect. But as I sat there in my simple navy dress, modest, yes, but filled with dignity, I felt it the moment I walked in, the shift in the air, whispers brushing against my back, women in sequins exchanging glances, a chuckle muffled behind a champagne glass. I straightened my shoulders, telling myself I had weathered judgment before. Being a single mother came with scars I had long since learned to carry. But this was different. This wasn't the quiet disapproval of neighbors. This was something sharper, heavier. And when Charlotte, the groom's mother, glided across the room, her diamonds flashing under the light, I knew. The way her eyes sliced through me, cold and deliberate. It was no accident. It was strategy. But I didn't yet understand why. Not yet. And that's what made my heart pound as the silence thickened around me, because deep inside, I could feel it. Something far more dangerous than humiliation was unfolding that night. The ballroom at the Waldorf Astoria glittered like a cathedral made of glass and gold. Rows of orchids cascaded from silver vases. Crystal chandeliers shimmered overhead, scattering light across golden tablecloths. A grand piano in the corner sang softly, its notes floating through the air like champagne bubbles. Guests drifted about in gowns that rustled like silk rivers, their laughter mingling with the clinking of crystal flutes. Every detail screamed perfection. But to me, it felt like stepping into a stage where I had been cast as the outsider. I smoothed the fabric of my navy dress. Plain, yes, but chosen with care. It wasn't couture. It wasn't sequins. But it carried dignity. It carried my story. Every stitch reminded me of the nights I had stayed up clipping coupons, the years of patching holes instead of buying new, the thousands of hours under hospital fluorescent lights so Sophie could one day walk down this aisle without worry. Yet as I took my seat near the front, whispers pressed at my back like cold fingers. A woman in emerald sequins tilted her glass toward another, her lips curling as her eyes flicked in my direction. A man chuckled into his napkin before glancing quickly away. I told myself I was imagining it. that the tightness in my chest was nerves, not rejection. But the longer I sat there, the heavier it grew. The chandeliers threw their light like judgment, sharp and unrelenting. The flowers smelled too sweet, almost suffocating. Even the music seemed to falter as if the piano itself knew what was coming. And then, she appeared. Charlotte. The groom's mother. Draped in ivory silk, diamonds glittering at her throat, a glass of champagne balanced effortlessly in her manicured hand. Her smile stretched wide for the guests, but when her eyes found me, sharp, cold, merciless, the smile turned to steel. She began to walk toward me. Each click of her heels against marble echoed louder than the piano, louder than the whispers, louder than my own heartbeat. I felt it then, not just humiliation, but the certainty that something darker was moving beneath this glittering surface. And in that moment, as Charlotte closed the distance between us, I knew. This night wasn't just about my daughter's wedding. It was about something much bigger. Something far more dangerous than I was ready to face. Charlotte stopped just inches from my chair. Her perfume, sharp, expensive, suffocating, cut through the air. The diamonds at her throat blazed under the chandeliers like cold fire. She raised her hand, her manicured finger slicing through the air until it landed squarely on me. You don't belong here. You're humiliating us. Leave. Now. Her voice cracked through the ballroom like glass shattering on marble. The pianist's hands froze above the keys. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the waiters carrying champagne flutes stood motionless, eyes wide, as if the air itself had been sucked out of the room. My throat tightened, heat rising up my neck. For a heartbeat, shame threatened to drag me under, to crush me in front of them all. I could hear the whispers ripple through the guests like a cruel tide. Did she just say that? To the mother of the bride. Someone gasped. Someone else muttered. Unbelievable. I searched for Sophie, my daughter, hoping for her eyes, her defense, her voice. But she was hidden behind layers of tulle and expectation. And then my gaze found Daniel. No, not Daniel. Michael, her groom. His tie was crooked, his jaw clenched. For the briefest second, his eyes met mine, and then dropped to the polished floor. The silence of his cowardice cut deeper than Charlotte's words. Inside, I begged myself not to crumble. Not here. Not in front of them. Not after everything I've sacrificed. So I rose. Slowly, deliberately, smoothing the fabric of my dress with trembling hands that refused to show their fear. My pulse thundered, but my voice, when it came, was steady. If that's how you feel, I said softly, each syllable slicing through the silence, then I'll leave. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Did she just?" Another voice, hushed but sharp, "Oh my God, the mother of the bride." I turned, each step toward the exit deliberate, my heels striking the marble like a drumbeat of defiance. My heart pounded, but not with shame. With clarity. Because even as the heavy doors closed behind me, muffling the orchestra's desperate attempt to recover, I knew this wasn't the end of my story. It was only the beginning. And soon, they would learn just how dangerous it was to strip a woman of her dignity in public. The heavy doors closed behind me, and the ballroom's glittering music was swallowed by silence. I found myself standing in the hotel's marble corridor, the air cooler, sharper, carrying the faint scent of lilies drifting from some distant vase. For a moment, I leaned against the wall, my knees threatening to buckle. The humiliation still burned across my skin, and my chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. Don't cry. Not here. Not for them. I inhaled deeply, the kind of breath that nurses like me had taken in sterile hospital corridors before delivering bad news. And in that stillness, a thought came, clear, cold, undeniable. If they had erased me from my daughter's wedding in front of everyone, then I would erase their wedding itself. I reached into my clutch bag, my fingers closing around the weight of my phone. The screen glowed against the dim hallway light. My thumb hovered for a moment, trembling, not from doubt, but from the enormity of what I was about to do. Then I scrolled to a number I had trusted for 15 years. Daniel Ortiz, my attorney. The man who had overseen every invoice, every deposit, every painstaking detail of this so-called celebration. He answered on the second ring, brisk and professional. Margaret. You never call during an event. Shouldn't you be enjoying your daughter's big day? I looked up at the chandeliers glowing through the glass doors above, where laughter tried to cover the gaping wound they had left in me. My voice came steady, stripped of all hesitation. Cancel everything. A pause. I'm sorry. What? Cancel every contract still pending. The florist, the catering, the hotel. Every check that hasn't cleared. Stop it. Effective immediately. If I am not welcome in that room, neither is my money. The silence on the other end thickened, as though even Daniel struggled to process the weight of my words. Finally, he exhaled sharply. Margaret, if I do this, the hotel will halt service mid-event. The catering trucks will turn around. The band will walk out. This will be public. Very public. I closed my eyes, remembering Charlotte's finger stabbing through the air, Michael's silence, Sophie's face hidden behind layers of lace. And I felt something inside me harden into stone. That's the point, I whispered. They made my humiliation public. Let the fallout be public too. Daniel hesitated only a moment longer, then said quietly, almost with reverence. Understood. Once I pull the calls, the unraveling begins. There will be no reversing it. My grip on the phone tightened. My reflection glimmered faintly in the polished marble wall beside me. A woman calm, steady, but burning with a new kind of fire. Do it, I said. And with those two words, the tide began to turn. Inside the Waldorf ballroom, the chandeliers still glittered, the music staggered back to life, and laughter tried to paper over the awkward silence I had left behind. But behind the velvet curtains, in a private anteroom meant for the bridal party, another conversation was unfolding, one that would twist the knife deeper than humiliation ever could. Charlotte shut the door with a snap, her diamonds rattling against the mirror as she turned to her husband, Richard. His cufflinks gleamed, but his expression was a storm barely contained. Good, he hissed. She's gone. Exactly as planned. Vanessa, the bride, stood in her satin gown, her bouquet trembling in her grip. Her smile had been flawless in front of the guests, but now her face paled, lips pressed thin. Are you sure about this? She whispered. She's Sophie's mother. If Sophie finds out. Richard cut her off with a short, humorless laugh. Sophie is desperate for love, for belonging. She'll cling to Michael no matter what. And once those vows are spoken, her mother's money becomes ours. Do you understand? Ours. The debts vanish. The creditors back off. This wedding isn't about family. It's about survival. Charlotte poured herself another glass of champagne, her manicured nails gleaming under the low light. She took a slow sip, then added, her tone sharp as steel. That woman was our biggest obstacle. Too cautious, too watchful. She would have asked questions. So we erased her, publicly. Now Sophie belongs to us, not her. Vanessa's shoulders stiffened. She glanced at her reflection in the mirror, her own eyes flickering with doubt. And if Sophie finds out the truth? Charlotte's smile didn't reach her eyes. Then she'll find out too late. By then, we'll already have what we need. In the distance, muffled but rising, a ripple of commotion stirred, the first cracks of Margaret's phone call beginning to fracture the illusion outside. But here in this room, the conspiracy still breathed, cloaked in silk and champagne. And none of them knew that their carefully woven plan was already unraveling. The knock came just past midnight, pounding through the quiet of my small Seattle home like a drumbeat of accusation. I rose from the armchair where I'd been sitting in silence, the glow of a single lamp stretching long shadows across the walls. My chest tightened. I knew who it was before I even opened the door. When it swung wide, there stood Sophie, my daughter. Her satin gown was wrinkled, her veil torn at the edges. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, and her hands shook as they clutched the doorframe. Her eyes, those same hazel eyes I had loved since the day she was born, blazed now with fury. "Mom," she spat, her voice hoarse from crying. "What have you done?" Her words hit me harder than Charlotte's ever could. "You destroyed my wedding. In front of everyone. The guests, Michael, his family. Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" I swallowed hard, steadying myself, but inside, a part of me shattered. I wanted to reach for her, to wipe away the tears on her cheeks. But her voice cut me again before I could move. "You embarrassed me, Mom. You humiliated me in front of the entire city. People are already posting about it online. Do you hate me that much?" Her words twisted deep. Hate. If only she knew how many nights I had bled for her, sacrificed for her, built this very day with my own hands. My voice trembled, but I forced it steady. "I didn't destroy anything, Sophie. I only stopped paying for my own humiliation." She stepped inside, her heels clattering against the hardwood, each sound like a blow. Her bouquet dropped to the floor, petals scattering like broken promises. "Humiliation," she screamed. "Is that what you call it? You always make everything about you. You couldn't let me have one day that wasn't about your sacrifices, your money, your control." Her words sliced sharper than glass. I felt them in my bones. But I would not collapse. "They stripped me of my dignity, Sophie," I said, my voice low but unyielding. "Your groom's mother pointed at me like I was dirt. And you said nothing. You let them erase me. I will not finance a wedding where I am treated as disposable." For a heartbeat, her face wavered, anger and something else, something like doubt. But then her jaw set, and her voice cracked with rage. "Michael's parents were right about you. Controlling. Selfish. Maybe Dad left because he saw it too. Maybe that's who you've always been." The words landed like stones against my chest. My breath caught. My own daughter, my only child, using the same venom her father once left behind. Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "If that's truly what you believe," I whispered, "then let Michael's family pay for your happily ever after. My money will not." Sophie's lips trembled. For a moment, I saw the little girl she once was, clutching my hand on the first day of school, begging me not to let go. But that girl was gone now, buried under lace and lies. Her shoulders squared, her voice like ice. "You'll regret this, Mom. You've lost me tonight. Forever." The slam of the door echoed like thunder, rattling the windows as she disappeared into the night. I sank into the armchair, my hands trembling, my chest hollow. The clock ticked steadily in the silence, indifferent to the storm that had just torn through my home. And yet, beneath the ache, a seed of certainty remained. Because I knew the truth would surface. And when it did, Sophie would finally see who had really betrayed her. By morning, the whispers had already spread beyond the golden walls of the Waldorf. In a city like Seattle, news traveled faster than wildfire, especially when it involved wealth, betrayal, and spectacle. Neighbors murmured in grocery aisles. Strangers repeated fragments of the story at coffee shops. At the farmer's market, I overheard a woman in a green scarf mutter to her friend, "Imagine humiliating the bride's own mother, when she paid for everything." Her friend shook her head, her voice hushed but sharp. "It's shameful. No amount of money makes that right." Even those who hadn't been at the wedding spoke as though they had witnessed it firsthand. The scene replayed itself through retellings. The finger pointed, the silence, the walk of dignity out the ballroom doors. Each time the story passed from one mouth to another, the weight of it grew heavier. But the true turning point came on Sunday morning. At St. Andrew's Church, Pastor Whitaker stood at the pulpit, his silver hair glinting under stained glass light. His words rolled through the pews with the steady cadence of judgment. "A marriage without respect," he declared, his voice low but unyielding, "cannot be blessed." Gasps rippled through the congregation. Whispers flared like sparks in dry grass. The message was clear. This was not just gossip anymore. It was a verdict. By that afternoon, the phrase had traveled across town like scripture. A marriage without respect cannot be blessed. People repeated it in diners, in barbershops, even at the waterfront where fishermen hauled in their catch. Vendors, too, began to withdraw. The florist sent a terse message. We will not attach our name to an event where the mother of the bride is discarded. The band followed. Our agreement is void. We play where respect exists. Even the hotel staff whispered behind polished counters. The Hayes family burns bridges. They humiliated the very woman who paid for their celebration. Everywhere the Hayes name turned, doors began to close. What they had once flaunted as prestige was now poison. And yet, I remained silent. I didn't need to raise my voice. The community was speaking for me. But as night fell and I sat in my quiet kitchen, the phone buzzed with a new message from my attorney, Daniel. His words made my heart tighten, my breath catch. Margaret, the message read. You should know, the Hayes debts are deeper than you realize. And their plan for Sophie. It goes far beyond money. I stared at the screen, the glow of it painting the kitchen walls pale. If the public humiliation had been the fire, then this was the smoke curling upward, warning of something darker still, something Sophie had yet to see. And I knew then. The true storm was only beginning. At first, the unraveling was almost invisible. A quiet ripple beneath the glitter. One waiter returned to the kitchen, tray of champagne untouched. Then another, setting his silver platter down and removing his gloves. The music faltered, not from hesitation this time, but because the pianist closed the lid of the grand piano and stood. His bow to the guests was sharp, final, before he walked out. Murmurs rose. Guests looked around, confused, laughter thinning into uneasy silence. And then, like dominoes, the collapse began. The florist's assistants wheeled carts into the ballroom and began plucking orchids from the tables, stems snapping in their hands. Golden vases were rolled out one by one, their gleam dulled in the harsh light of disruption. Someone gasped. Are they taking the flowers away? Yes. They were. Moments later, hotel staff entered, not with champagne, but with clipboards. Their voices were firm, unbending. The account holder has cancelled payment. Service is discontinued. The chandeliers still burned overhead, but now their light felt cold, exposing every crease of panic on Charlotte's face. Her diamonds no longer looked like triumph, but shackles tightening around her throat. Richard's voice thundered, trying to negotiate, trying to demand, but the manager only shook his head. Vanessa's bouquet slipped from her hands, petals scattering across the marble floor like ashes. Guests began to rise, some whispering, some pulling out their phones, recording, capturing every second of the spectacle. Michael, the groom, tugged at his tie, his face pale with humiliation. He reached for Sophie's hand, but even she hesitated, her eyes darting between the staff carrying out trays of food and the band members packing their instruments. The fantasy she had clung to was dissolving before her eyes. And then it happened. The ballroom doors opened wide, and the catering staff rolled their carts straight out of the room, leaving half-eaten plates abandoned, champagne glasses half full, desserts uneaten. Gasps turned to nervous laughter, then to sharp, gleeful whispers. Did you hear? The mother of the bride pulled the plug. She paid for everything. And they threw her out. Justice. That's what this is. Phones flashed. Hashtags formed. By the time the chandeliers flickered in the video cameras of half the guests, the Hayes family's downfall was already spilling into the city beyond. Charlotte's face burned crimson as she hissed to Richard. Control this. Now. But there was no control left to seize. Not when respect had been stripped, not when money had been withdrawn, not when the community had chosen its verdict. And Sophie, my Sophie, stood frozen at the altar, tears streaking down her cheeks, as the wedding she thought was her beginning collapsed into ruin around her. What she didn't know, what none of them yet realized, was that this was not just a wedding falling apart. It was the mask itself, tearing away to reveal the rot beneath. The ballroom was in chaos, half-empty tables, flowers ripped from their vases, champagne glasses abandoned mid-toast. Guests stood in clusters, whispering, recording, waiting for the next crack in the illusion. And then the crack split wide open. It began with a man in a dark grey suit, rising from the back of the hall. His voice cut clean through the noise. "Richard Hayes. You owe me $15,000. 6 months overdue." Gasps swept the room. Richard stiffened, his hand tightening around Charlotte's arm. "Not here," he hissed. But the man stepped forward, his tone sharper now, fueled by months of bitterness. "Oh yes, here. You've dodged my calls, avoided my office. But you couldn't hide forever. You throw a wedding like royalty while your debts drown the rest of us." The crowd buzzed louder. And then another voice joined in, a woman near the bandstand. "He owes me too. 20 grand. Never paid." One by one, the whispers became accusations. Vendors, creditors, business acquaintances, faces Richard had smiled at for years, turned against him in a storm of betrayal. Each voice added another stone to the avalanche. Charlotte's diamonds glinted harshly under the lights, but her face was ashen. "Stop this," she snapped, her voice cracking. "This is slander." But no one listened. The truth had gained momentum, unstoppable now. In the corner, Sophie's veil slipped from her hair as she stared at Michael, her groom, who stood rigid, his fists clenched. "Michael, is this true?" Her voice broke. Michael's silence was the loudest answer of all. Charlotte, desperate, raised her voice above the rising tide. "This is our family's private matter. We are not criminals." But her words only fanned the flames. "Private?" One guest scoffed. "You humiliated your daughter-in-law's mother in public. You made it public." And then came the final blow. A hotel manager, flanked by security, stepped forward, his clipboard in hand. His voice carried the authority of final judgment. "The accounts under Richard Hayes are delinquent. Effective immediately. All services are terminated. Furthermore, our staff has been advised not to extend credit to the Hayes family again." The room froze, then erupted in whispers so sharp they cut like glass. Blacklisted. Finished. Exposed. Sophie's bouquet slipped from her trembling hands, scattering petals across the floor. She whispered again, her voice barely audible. "Michael, how could you let this happen?" And in that silence, humiliation no longer mine, but theirs, I realized the truth had finally clawed its way into daylight. This was never about love. It was never about Sophie's happiness. It was about survival. About greed. About using my daughter as a pawn to pay off their debts. The Hayes family hadn't just lost their wedding. They had lost their mask. And Sophie, my only child, was standing at the center of the wreckage, her future dangling by threads she didn't yet understand. The ballroom no longer glittered. The chandeliers still burned, but their light felt cruel now. Harsh, unforgiving, exposing everything Sophie had refused to see. Her veil clung to her damp cheeks, her gown heavy as chains. She turned to Michael, searching his face for denial, for love, for anything that could prove this wasn't real. "Michael," her voice cracked, fragile as glass. "Tell me they're lying. Tell me this isn't true." But Michael couldn't look at her. His jaw worked, his fists clenched, but his eyes stayed fixed on the polished floor, the same silence he had offered when his mother humiliated me. Sophie's breath caught, her chest tightening as though the lace bodice itself was strangling her. "You knew," she whispered, her voice trembling. "All this time, you knew." Charlotte stepped forward, her diamond necklace trembling against her collarbone. "Sophie, darling, don't listen to them. This is business. Families have debts, but once you're married, you'll be secure. You'll have status, protection." Sophie spun, her voice rising, sharp with betrayal. "Protection? Is that what you call it? You used me. You used my mother. Every flower, every plate of food, every chandelier in this room, paid for with her sacrifices. And you let her be thrown out like she was nothing. The guests fell silent. Even the whispers stilled. Richard's voice cracked, defensive and desperate. We did what was necessary. Do you want to end up poor, Sophie? Do you want to scrape by like she did, clipping coupons and patching shoes? We gave you a chance at more. But Sophie's tears had already turned to fire. Her voice cut through the air, trembling but strong. No, you didn't give me anything. She did. Every dollar, every dream, every moment of this day came from my mother. And you humiliated her. You destroyed her. Her hands shook as she ripped the veil from her head, tossing it to the marble floor where it pooled like a discarded ghost. The gasp that followed rippled through the guests like thunder. Charlotte reached out, desperate, her smile breaking into shards. Sophie, wait. Don't let her poison you against us. You belong with us now. But Sophie stepped back, shaking her head, her voice cracking into sobs. I don't belong to you. I never did. And if this is what love looks like in your family, I'd rather walk away in rags than stay in silk built on lies. She turned, her gown trailing behind her, the petals of her bouquet crushed under her steps. The doors loomed ahead, heavy, golden, waiting. And as she reached for the handle, she whispered, almost to herself but loud enough to echo through the stunned silence. Mom was right. Dignity is worth more than any diamond. The doors opened with a groan, spilling her into the cold night air. And inside the ballroom, the Hayes family stood exposed, stripped of their wealth, their mask, and now the bride herself. It was nearly dawn when the knock came again. Softer this time, hesitant, almost afraid. I sat at the kitchen table, a mug of cold tea untouched, my hands folded in front of me. The house was silent but for the ticking of the clock on the wall. For a moment, I considered not answering. My heart had been battered enough. But something deep inside, a mother's instinct that never truly dies, pulled me to the door. When I opened it, Sophie stood there. No veil now, no bouquet, no shimmer of chandeliers in her hair. Just my daughter, her eyes swollen from crying, her gown wrinkled, her shoulders trembling beneath the early morning chill. Mom! Her voice cracked, breaking on that single word. For a moment, neither of us moved. I could still hear her words from the night before echoing in my chest like bruises. Selfish, controlling, maybe Dad was right. The wounds were still raw. And yet, as I looked at her, broken, stripped of illusions, her pride scattered like the petals she dropped on the ballroom floor, I felt the ache of love rise stronger than the sting of betrayal. She stepped forward, her lips trembling. I'm so sorry. I didn't see it. I didn't see any of it. I wanted to believe in them, in him. And I let them turn me against you. Her knees buckled, and before I could speak, she sank onto the porch steps, clutching the fabric of her gown in her fists. I thought love was supposed to save me. But all it did was blind me. And you were the only one trying to protect me. Tears blurred my vision. I knelt beside her, reaching out, my hand trembling as I brushed the damp strands of hair from her face. Her skin was cold against my palm, but beneath it, I felt the same pulse I had known since she was a baby, since the nights I held her against my chest and promised her the world would not break her. Love doesn't blind us, Sophie, I whispered, my voice breaking. Greed does. Lies do. But real love, the kind I have carried for you all these years, never asks you to sacrifice your dignity. It lifts you, even when you can't see it. She pressed her face into my shoulder, sobbing. Her words muffled against the fabric of my dress. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I held her tighter, my own tears spilling freely now. You don't need to deserve it. You're my daughter. My love for you was never something you had to earn. It was always yours. The sun had begun to rise, casting pale gold across the horizon. The light filtered through the window behind us, spilling warmth across the kitchen floor as though the house itself exhaled after a long night of holding its breath. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt my heart ease. Not healed entirely. Some wounds take longer to mend. But softer. Hopeful. Sophie pulled back, her hands still clutching mine as if afraid I might vanish. Her voice steadied, though her eyes brimmed with tears. Teach me, Mom. Teach me how to be strong like you. How to stand tall even when the world tries to push you down. I brushed her cheek gently, my voice steady now. You already did tonight, Sophie. You walked away. And that was the bravest thing you could have done. We sat there together, mother and daughter, wrapped in silence and tears, as the light of a new day spread across the sky. And in that fragile dawn, after a night of shattered glass and broken illusions, we found each other again. Not as a mother betrayed and a daughter blinded, but as two women bound by love, dignity, and the courage to begin again. Weeks have passed since that night at the Waldorf. The whispers that once stung me now belong to someone else. The Hayes name has become a cautionary tale in Seattle, spoken not with envy, but with pity, even contempt. Their debts followed them into every corner of the city. No contracts. No trust. No place left to hide. And Sophie, she has begun to heal. The lace gown is tucked away, no longer a chain around her shoulders but a memory, a reminder of how illusions can blind even the best of us. Each morning, she sits with me at this very kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee instead of clutching a veil. Her laughter is quieter now, but truer. And though we have scars between us, we are stitching them closed, thread by thread, word by word. As for me, I've walked these weeks with a strange kind of peace. Not because the Hayes family fell, but because I finally understood something. Silence, when born of dignity, speaks louder than rage. Walking away wasn't weakness. It was strength. And strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply refuses to bow. If you've ever been humiliated, if you've ever been told you are less than what you are, remember this. You don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need to fight to prove your worth. Stand tall. Hold your ground. The world will catch up to the truth in time. Because love without respect isn't love at all. And dignity, once claimed, is never lost. That night, when Sophie knocked on my door in tears, I realized something else too. A mother's love doesn't vanish when a child stumbles. It bends. It breaks. But it waits. And sometimes, that waiting is what saves them. So if you carry anything from my story, let it be this. Protect your dignity the way you protect your heart. Don't trade it for diamonds, or chandeliers, or false promises. Because respect is the foundation. And a house without a foundation will always collapse. Mine didn't. And that is why, after everything, I can still smile when I say, dignity speaks louder than revenge.